So we're ready? All right, we'll call the special meeting of the International Falls Economic Development Authority to order. Roll call. All commissioners are present except Commissioner Droba. New business. Consider Kraus Anderson fee for proposal to provide construction management services for the Voyager National Park headquarters re-roofing project. Ted Brokaw.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is the fee for Kraus Anderson to put the contract together and manage the project for the re-roofing project and repairs due to the roof leaking at Voyageurs National Park.
Okay, do I have a motion? Oh, yeah. Do you have something?
I'll make the motion.
All right. Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second? Any discussion?
I got a problem with doing this, just because of what the work that Kraus Anderson's done at the airport that we're still in litigation over and in court over. So I just have an issue with Kraus Anderson being involved with another project when we're in litigation with them over there yet.
On a leaky roof.
On the leaky roof, yeah. So it's,
Yeah, go ahead if everybody.
And I don't know what's going on with the airport. I could just honestly say with some of the contractor issues I've had and whatnot, I have been very impressed with the work that Kraus Anderson has done for the city on my end. I don't know where I'd be without him to be able to run these projects. And the one thing about it is they're not actually doing the work, right? They're putting the contract together and they're the ones holding the contractor accountable to make sure that the contractor does the work the way they're supposed to.
and that didn't happen.
Well, and I'm saying it has with the work I've done.
Okay.
That's, I'm not familiar with what's going on with the airport.
And what are these deadlines that are on this proposal? Is that, been met, haven't they already?
Mm-hmm.
So is it done?
Yep.
The roof is done already?
Well, no, we still got some repairs to do.
So do we have this proposal before they even started?
I had the proposal before it started, but with the quarterly meetings with the EDA, I couldn't get it in front of you.
Well, how's it look, the new roof?
Good, good. To be honest with you, compared to the two projects with the one contractor, with the new contractor that we approved at the last, it was day and night difference. Very professional and they got it done. I mean, we still got some work to do, but
Well, the contractor that did the airport terminal building, it wouldn't be the same one that was doing this. So Kraus Anderson's is just managing the
yep.
job. I know I was disappointed in the terminal building too. I mean, it was, when you have a building that nice and you attend a KEDA meeting and they got buckets out in the conference room, it was,
And I get it. I'm not familiar with what the issues are out there, so, I could say I'm happy, I'm satisfied, I think they've done a great job.
And we've already had them doing stuff other than this project.
Yep.
This year out there, because I've signed, I don't know how many, once I figured out I got contracts to sign, but I figured out that deal. Well, so any more comments on the? All right, I'll ask the question.
No.
Aye.
no.
Aye. So now what do we do?
that he votes.
Didn't we approve the roof to be rebuilt?
Yep.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't know, is this on top of what we approved, or was it already in there?
No, you approved the 163,700 for when we accepted the quotes for the roof.
So is
And this is actually an amendment to the original contract with the drainage project that's still been ongoing for 2 years out there.
Oh, well, I have this one, because so it's not part of the 163?
Nope. It's,
Additional?
their side of the 163 is $16,728.
So it's additional to the 163?
Mhm.
I guess as being on the airport commission, it just, to me, doesn't look good to be in litigation with a company that we're gonna give more work to, but it's already been done, so I guess I'll have to change my vote to yes, just because it's already done, but it's not a good yes, but I'll vote yes, we'll keep moving forward with it.
All right, I'll vote yes too, but I was disappointed in how it turned out at the terminal building.
I agree that we all were disappointed with that, but we do have it done, and we haven't had problems with them out at, since, for 10 years out at 14, however long it's been, two out there. All right, well then, 2 votes for change, motion carries.
Thank you.
Yep. Housing opportunities, Ted Brokaw.
So as part of the League of Minnesota Cities Conference that I was invited to last year by the city administrator, part of some of the talks that I had or sat in on was talking about adding infrastructure for housing, which is something we've struggled with for a long time. Is housing is an issue where, without annexing and expanding outside the city boundaries, where else could we look at doing housing within the city to try and spur some new development? And as some of the presentations that I have sat through, there's different pockets. There's low-income housing, there's workforce housing, there's market rate housing, and I'm finding out that as you go through this process, there's a lot of work you have to put out in front before you can just go and apply for the money. And the problem is, a lot of times, we're behind. When a funding opportunity comes up, we're so far behind that by the time we get our information together of what we want to do, the deadline's already passed. And I've talked at length about Public Works, I've talked to it about here, is that I've sat down with Bolton and Mink, and we've picked out 3 different scenarios, 3 parts of town that we think we could expand or improve on utilities to try and spur some form of housing. Bolton and Mink staff are online to kind of lay out a presentation of what they feel we need to do to be able to get into that housing game. I've sat down with one private developer or one private property owner that is interested in expanding or building homes on their property. There's opportunity in another area for manufactured homes, not mobile homes, but manufactured homes. So we looked at an area that was already platted, that's tax forfeited property, about whether we would want to add a block or 2 of utilities and roads and try and qualify for funding to help us with the utilities, plus to help with the housing on that side. Another part is 9th Street with the planned, or, the planning that we have going on for the road reconstruction is to try and, if we go through and we replace all the utilities and rebuild the road, with some of the vacant lots that are along there, whether we can spur or get help to put those utilities in to offer up those areas for housing. So that's kind of the three scenarios that you're going to see. It's just the start, but we have a lot of work we have to do to be able to try and apply for some of this funding. And this, I would say, is the first step. So I will hand it off. Does anybody have any questions of me to begin with?
Nope, so go ahead.
Thank you, Ted. Good evening. Thanks for accommodating the hybrid approach. Sarah and I will be online. I wanted to acknowledge our teammate, Jason Fisher's in the room. He's our Client Services Manager and Engineering Advisor on this project as well, helped us put this together and think through kind of the more technical infrastructure components. So we're here, like Ted said, to really help you get housing in the ground. A lot of communities we work in have a housing crisis of all kinds. However, we believe that we can work with you to customize a solution, because a one-size-fits-all does not work in every community. So we come in with the data, we come in with the analysis, we look at the sites very closely, and then we look at what is buildable, what is not, and what actually fits on that site. So we're going to go through the presentation briefly. We can take questions as we're talking. Please feel free to interject if you wish. But Sarah and I are going to share this a PowerPoint, and before we get into that, we'd like to just introduce ourselves very briefly. And Sarah, did you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thanks again for having us. My name is Sarah Swedberg. I'm one of our planners on our team. I've worked a lot in Greater Minnesota, and that's always exciting to get back to more northern Minnesota areas where I grew up. So thank you for having us again, working on all sorts of projects related to housing, whether it's housing studies or having lots of conversations with cities about some of these kind of more site-specific developments as we learn more and prepare more for some of these housing funding opportunities that are coming from the state.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I'm Moira Howenstein. I'm a senior planner out of the Mankato office with Bolton and Mink. I have about 25 years experience both in government and on the private side. Believe it or not, I've actually built many subdivisions because I'm also an architect. So I always like to test our planners with real life challenges and questions. So I'm the grounding force on the team. And about 2 years ago, I had the pleasure working with the City of International Falls to create the housing location study. I'm sure some of you have gone on the website that is similar to this story map, where it indicates what sites are available for developers, right? So that they can just pull up whether there's infrastructure, if there's sidewalks, if it's in a floodplain or a wetland. So that's the kind of stuff that we did back then. So this really brings it to the next step, and we'll focus on these 3 additional sites. And that's what we are going to go through our presentation. We may ask you to scroll simply because we cannot necessarily see where you are at. So forgive us for directing you, but we may ask you to scroll to a specific location. So we'll first start with site assessment, data collection, and market analysis. Hopefully you can see that heading. And what we would like to do is propose an a la carte menu where we're like, this is what we think you should do, but we will certainly modify our proposal to based on your direction. So this is not set in stone. It is just our expertise being offered to you. We'd like to look at these 3 sites with all of their uniqueness, everything from their infrastructure capacities, how close is the infrastructure, what would it take, what are the roads like, where are the services as well. Oftentimes, as engineers and planners, we only look at infrastructure, but we forget about where are the services that will provide EMS, fire, police. So we'll look at that as well. We also take a GIS analysis where we look at we create a constraints map. So we look at things that are unbuildable to figure out what is left so that we can lay out the actual housing development. So at the end of this, you will actually get a conceptual layout, but it will be still a very real concept of what the housing would look like. we look at soil types, topography, and things like that as well. So that is really our GIS analysis that looks at physical qualities. Also, we look at the information that requires approval. So what kind of zoning is it? What are the steps? How shovel-ready is this? Because that's truly what the developers want, right? They don't, time is money, they want to go straight to building permit.
Absolutely. If you keep scrolling down, we want to just highlight the 3 sites that we've been talking with Ted about, and Ted did a great job setting you all up with understanding of what we're looking at doing and who some of these sites might serve. So the first site is kind of on the east side of town. We think it is potentially suitable for that kind of factory assembled house like Ted was mentioning. We would envision these to meet a lower income household, single level, probably homes. This is located over on what would be Fifth Avenue East. We're looking at probably about 2 blocks of area to start with. As mentioned, this is some tax forfeited area. And just to give you a better idea, that factory assembled house is truly that. It's those homes that are built inside a factory setting. So not necessarily not a mobile home, but assembled in that factory setting, brought to site and finished there on site. And we're seeing some cost savings in the development of those houses by approaching that construction a little bit differently than a traditional on-site stick-built home. If you keep scrolling, site 2 that we're exploring is what we'll call Shorewood, so south of that Shorewood Drive and Crabtree Boulevard area. The property owner has been speaking with Ted and has expressed some willingness to collaborate. It's currently privately owned, which just means we're approaching, looking at this site a little bit differently, and have to keep in mind that we've got additional partners that we want to be working with as we're thinking about this particular site. There was a preliminary plat developed for this site, but it was never finalized, so we would need to go through that process again. And then site number 3 is 9th Street, which Ted mentioned, currently a project underway. We think this is a really great opportunity for some of that infill development. So how we can fit houses in between or amongst where existing homes are. We know that there's some tax forfeited parcels. We know that there's some blighted properties, some properties that might have opportunity for renovation, lots of kind of varied approaches to how this project might come out to be. This is also an opportunity to explore some really unique housing solutions. So things like Boxable and Icon, with the understanding that these unique housing solutions have to keep in mind, of course, the cold weather climate in northern Minnesota, and making sure that those are appropriately built for that climate. But this is also an opportunity for some kind of test piloting, if you will, right? Because we're working on this infrastructure project, we'll have those real-time numbers and understanding of how this infrastructure project has played out, and utilize that understanding to inform the development of sites 1 and 2, or be planning for the development of that infrastructure. So it's a unique opportunity with that ongoing project on the plate. The next section is our market analysis section. Something important, of course, when we're thinking about these sites is we want to keep in mind the local context, the local trends, the supply and demand, of course. We're seeing a little bit of softening perhaps in the housing market, but still certainly a crisis and a top priority for many, many cities throughout both the state and the country. And so we just want to make sure we're always keeping that community context in mind. If you keep scrolling, public outreach and concept development. A different approach that we like to take with all of our housing work, whether it's a full housing study or something like this when we're developing sites, is we want to make sure that we're communicating early and often with public as well as stakeholders that might have specific interest in housing development. through this project, we would propose developing a communications plan and making sure that we've got some unique opportunities for people to learn more about these different sites and to provide input and insight as local residents and as stakeholders into the process. I think there's a lot of different opportunities for, engaging with, of course, like real estate agents and some of those kind of people, but it's also an opportunity just for education about different types of housing and trying to destigmatize what we like to call attainable housing. So housing that can be people that can afford housing at all different income levels, and thinking about how these different unique sites might serve folks' different needs. On the right side of this particular slide, you'll see this unique input ID tool. If you hit the continue button on that pop-up window, it'll show you what this input ID tool. It's a proprietary tool that we have been using in some of our projects that allow people to interact online and provide feedback in that way. So as you'll see, people can pick a type of comment that they want to leave. So whether they're a resident, a business, maybe they're a recreational user in this particular case for this project example. And then all of the dots that you see of those symbols on the map are people that have put in specific comments to those areas throughout the city, in this case of Fargo, West Fargo area. And they're leaving comments about different areas in town where they have transportation issues or other such things, or maybe something that they really like that's happening in town. And then other users, when they're submitting comments, can also provide and reply back to them, almost like a Facebook comment feed or something like that, where they can interact with each other on those comments. So somebody might agree that they've had the same experience, or somebody might disagree and say, I've had a completely different experience at this, say, intersection or site or different kind of need like that. So we like to showcase that tool as an additional add-on opportunity should the city be interested in something a little bit more techy. Oh, where are you muted?
Sorry, I had to do that, right? Of course, so I apologize. So in a way, we are doing the market analysis. Oftentimes developers look for that. We are front loading that for them for these specific sites. And by doing the public outreach, we are telling them what the community really wants to see as a housing product. So we find that that's a really important step in getting to the point where, if you scroll down, you will see the layout. So once we do the analysis of the site, of the infrastructure capacities, then we are able to actually lay out the design, so to speak. And again, these are not full permit drawings. They're not architectural and engineering drawings that you can go for permit for. These are still conceptual, but they give us enough information to be able to do a pro forma at the level that the grants require us to be able to determine how many housing units, at what income level and what pricing points, at what rental and what type, and how are they laid out. And so that's the level of detail that the grants need in order to qualify for those funds. So that is the kind of sketch that we would be producing by working with planning, GIS, engineering, and getting into that level of analysis. Of course, we will look at density and all of the zoning rules that you have in place to be able to get through the land entitlement process in an efficient way. And as you scroll a little past that, it all leads to costing calculations, right? Because these are all wonderful drawings and ideas, but if we don't have the reality of costs and considerations, then again, it becomes unrealistic to qualify for these grants. But if we do have these preliminary quantities and costs and details, we can look at a variety of grants, not just federal, state, but also philanthropic, private. And so there's an array out there that Sarah will touch upon in a minute. But we will provide preliminary costs to be able to calculate the general construction of infrastructure, roads, sewer, water, utilities, and then bundle that with the actual housing costs, and then show how that aligns with the demographic and the market needs and demands.
Great. And the question always on people's mind is how are we going to pay for these projects and keep them moving along? So we want to keep our funding source opportunities top of mind as we're thinking about these different sites, and we're also thinking about the products of what this project would result in. There is a number of new housing programs that the state, Minnesota Housing in particular, created as part of the legislature created out of Minnesota Housing in the 2023 session. Some of these programs include the Greater Minnesota Housing Infrastructure Grant. That one I think is particularly top of mind for lots of cities, because for a long time in Greater Minnesota, we've talked about how can we afford to build more infrastructure for housing, especially single family housing, right, and new platted land. So that one, everybody's keeping a really close eye on. There's also an opportunity for what the state has called Tier 2 cities to receive some additional funding to help with housing costs. So that might be project-based, it might be actual development-based, but there's some opportunity for smaller cities that haven't received other dollars, such as International Falls, to apply for some additional grant funding in that way. We also know that there's the Manufactured Home Community Redevelopment Program, which again would lend itself most to Site 1, but might be applicable elsewhere. These funding sources will be considered as concepts, of course, are identified and developed. We're working closely with the state to have continued conversation and making sure that we as a team, alongside our funding team internally, understand these different opportunities so that we can help the cities navigate these new programs that are underway and being created. We know that there's a lot of competition, or we expect there to be a lot of competition for some of these funds. And our best advice, as we've been talking to the state and with other cities, is to be doing this work that we're talking about tonight, to be developing sites and to be understanding that pro forma level work, so that when these grant programs become available, you're prepared and have a competitive grant application that can be added into the pool. I think the more that we show that demand to the legislature, I would expect, we would hope that might see continued funding as well for some of these newer programs, especially that infrastructure development program. All of this would wrap up, if you scroll to the very bottom, into, of course, the report that summarizes this work and the documentation. Again, we've talked about how that 9th Street project is a bit of a pilot project that allows us to understand real time how that infrastructure project goes and apply that knowledge to these other sites as well. And I will pass it back to Moira to wrap us up.
Yeah, so we want to really just hear your thoughts and questions. Again, this is just us proposing some ideas, hoping to get your direction to customize things and really get you to a point where, as we go through the analysis and the development of the concepts and looking at what grants match up with those ideas that the community really wants to see, working with the developers and the owners of the land together as a team, and finding the right identification of product with funding source to get houses built. And this is not just about building infrastructure, but because we need the infrastructure to sustain development, not just housing, but everything that comes with it. However, we ultimately understand that the priority is to get houses to go vertical and be built in your community. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Anybody have any questions at this time?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been talking about this since 2017. The way normally development in the city has went is a developer puts the infrastructure in and turns it over to the city. We can't do that anymore. We can't get anybody to do that anymore. So in 2017, 2018, we talked a lot about the city needs to get involved with putting the infrastructure in. Now, they bring up a very good point. You can put in all the infrastructure you want, but you want the houses built. I'm not a housing person. But every time somebody comes to me about wanting to build houses, they ask, you know, can you help with the I'm focused on the roads and the infrastructure. I feel that we scaled this to a point where it's manageable. You know, we didn't go and pick 12 city blocks, you know, a huge area. You know, it's got to be manageable. But since 2017, this, with what came out in the legislature in 2023, is the first time I've ever heard money in there for infrastructure. And that's what piqued my interest, because that's what I've been asked, is, you know, and I invited Mr. Nevin in here, and maybe he's got some questions, but he has called me several times wanting to know about, can you put infrastructure in there? And I can barely replace the infrastructure we need to now. So we need help to be able to add more. And I don't like the idea that we can't replace a bad water line, but we're putting in new ones. And I just think that, you know, trying to, I call it a game, play the funding game, is, and there's money that the state has put out there, and they really don't know how it's gonna look yet, but I think we're in a good position that if we go down this road, we're gonna have a very good opportunity on being able to have a legitimate shot at getting funding to help us with infrastructure and housing.
Paul, you got anything that, yeah?
You know, we had the meeting as a housing collaborative after the county and the city both funded this county-wide study. And a lot of the information came out of that, some good numbers and some real actionable items. But where do you go from here? And that's where we've been admiring the problem. And, you know, it's good to see like an AV school, apartments and some of the stuff downtown. But we hear a lot from Rob Pascal Clinic, single-family homes. And how do you get to, I went to a housing summit in Grand Rapids earlier this year, and they're right, it's a very competitive, going after this new money that's available, over $1 billion in their housing. But every community that in Grand Rapids, okay, talked about what they're doing. They're prepping, they're doing exactly what they're talking. In order to make a competitive bid for those dollars, you have to have a plan that's based on real numbers and sites that are buildable and all of the other prerequisites that these guys are talking about. And unless you position yourself, I think we're going to continue on this path of just, you know, admiring it and not being able to really move forward. Again, across a whole spectrum of housing, we're going to have, they're talking about 9th Street infill. The east would be those manufactured homes, and Shorewood Crabtree would be the single family, the whole umbrella. So you've got the whole host of housing types in one plan, which I think is really smart too, because we need all the housing that with this approach. So I think it's a good investment, and it just helps you get closer to, rather than just sitting and admiring the problem, being able to leverage these state funds, knowing the cost of infrastructure, tell me the cost of a block of, you know, sewer and water and roadway, and it's especially up here, it's cost prohibitive to a lot of developers to get into that game. So I'm again admiring this for a long time. I applaud the city and the EDA for at least getting to this point and looking at it, because I don't think anything's going to measurably happen without some sort of investment like this with a good team. And these folks have done it all over the region, so they've been there and they've done it. So just my
Thanks. Anybody else? Any questions for the ladies? Go ahead.
One part I didn't see, or maybe I missed it, is we looked at housing for elderly.
Mhm.
The one level, maybe is that, you know what I'm
Part
talking about?
of, right, and so that's why I tried to emphasize is, I don't want to be the housing person, okay?
Yep.
You know, I think there's spots to do a large complex like that. What I'm looking at is the infrastructure side of it, okay? And there are financial opportunities that if somebody wants to do multifamily housing, there is funding for us to add infrastructure to it. But this was to add blocks. You know, it's to add a block, add 2 blocks of infrastructure and try and help spur some houses being built. That's the way I guess I would look at, how I looked at it.
Good place to start.
You know,
Yeah.
it's, but the multifamily housing, Commissioner Wagner, I really haven't, that hasn't been my focus because, you know, most of the places that I feel would qualify for something like that has got the infrastructure very close compared to actually building a road with water and sewer and storm sewer and street lighting, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And on that, for the, like I say, seniors, but that could be like a single level home, even not even like the condominiums or whatever.
Yeah.
Or what, but even myself, when I finally drove down by 9th Street one day, and I looked at it myself, you know, this might be a good place for some little tiny houses or whatever, right there on that block. Because it's amazing, I went on that tour in Duluth, that same LMC, of what those little look like and what they have going on in there, you know, and they talk about from northern Minnesota, well, these are built in Duluth, and they have a whole village of them, you know.
Was that the tour that, you got asked to leave the bus, right?
I think I kicked
Yeah,
off the
okay.
bus.
Yeah, well, that's because I got there first and we didn't sign up. I didn't know that was a rule. But anyhow, but we saw, but there were, and some other things that make it different with zoning and
didn't
stuff.
forget that.
to make it work. So, well, if we don't have any more questions, we thank you for your time and your information, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I would just like to say, keep telling, like we've been, I say that since the last time I was on the council, housing was a thing. And this year, we've been talking since we got there, and I think even though we appointed somebody to the HRA today, but I think we're at the point now though too where I think we know we're gonna have to do some of this lifting ourselves to get some of this going. And I would think a plan like this would be a good idea.
Any other questions for me?
I don't have any more questions for you. Anybody else have questions for Ted?
So
Or
did-
Jason?
Is this, we've already paid for this thing, or?
No.
Oh, okay,
No,
this
this
is
is a
just-
proposal. Do we want to?
This, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's where I was wondering where it was going.
Yeah. Yeah.
How soon do you gotta know that?
Yeah.
Or do we?
That's,
Sooner the better.
So-
As they indicated, that's why I was raising my hand, as they indicated, kind of an à la carte situation
Yeah.
as they moved through it. However, like it says, some have to be connected with other pieces of it.
Yeah.
As a whole, it looks like about $59,000.
Yeah.
And that's why we brought it to the EDA. Ted asked to have it here. EDA has some funding available. We are gonna be looking at 2025 budgets with, Emma next. So it's something that if you guys want to sit on a little bit and think about it, and if they have any questions for Ted or Jason or Maura or Sarah, we can definitely come back with that, or if there's something any of you'd like to move forward today, that's kind of in your guys' court as an EDA.
So? And that is what we're moving on. Where's my agenda? Moving on to next is consider the 2025 EDA budget. So, Emma, yeah. Thanks, Paul. Unless you guys want to talk more about this, do we want a little time, more time to think on it, or? Do we want to think on it more? Yeah, Emma, come on up.
Yeah,
Yeah, so come on up and we can, talk about it together.
So. What? Oh. So EDA budget, in the past, you can kind of see the line items that we've previously appropriated monies to, the KEDP funds are consistently the same, would you say? So 22.5, and it's essentially, would you say in and out? I see 22.5s.
No,
I'm
the.
not an expert on
Yeah,
the.
but nope, that's okay. The KDP funds for the 22.5, they come in two halves, 11,250 each half, the way the county appropriates those funding. In the past, we've used them for the chamber, helping fund the chamber. Last year, the committee agreed to fund the 4th of July at 16,000 out of this line item, so that's out of those dollars as well. 5,000 of that went to, an additional 5,000 was budgeted for the chamber, that advertising program, the brochure that they just put out. So that's what those funds were for, those revenues were used for. Then we also have the lands and for sale of property. As you can see over the years, that kind of varies depending upon their land sales and timber sales and the wood and all of that. We get an appropriation, a percentage of those funds. So we usually budget, similar to that 22.5 in that line item, and that one varies. And the Rainy River, they have not asked
No.
for funding this year, so we have not put anything into there.
Correct.
And, so it's kind of discussion on what, the two revenues are the 22.5, both of those. And then what you guys are gonna approve as expenses. Are you agreeing to approve the same or a different amount for the 4th of July for 2025? That would be something you guys would need to let us know what you would like to do there.
I think we should continue.
Yep.
Oh, continue, was that,
4th of July.
yeah, I know, see, but was that enough?
Well, isn't there monies from something else too for that, or no? I
For the
thought-
4th of July?
Yeah, I thought he had some,
There was leftovers from last year, and I think they're
Okay.
sitting at about
that's what it was.
$5,000 in a balance from the 2023,
And what, or for,
2024.
well, yeah, I just, if you needed more, I was
Yeah.
gonna, but
No, I think,
that'll do, because
We had it-
one of the things we started, and I'd like to keep us doing it, a little bit of a month, but people have really enjoyed the last two concerts we have
Yes.
put on.
Yes.
I have great comments again on the concert and the whole 4th of July celebration. And being downtown as much as I was, doing whatever it was, and it was good, so we're good with that.
Yeah.
Then, I'd also like to give $10,000 from this to the museum, from our EDA money.
So was it gonna be out of this fund, or was it gonna be out of the 208? Because I think I had tentatively put it in the 208 fund, and I have to remember why. Because it mirrored the funding that we did. I don't know, who was it?
gotta think about that. 208 is,
And maybe that's not the appropriate place, but I put it there because it was picking up where something else left off.
I have it on my, do you have a full budget with you?
No.
Do you have a full budget book?
He's got a stack. It's the,
Red book?
money we gave for the KCTV. Somewhere here.
And maybe that was where.
For the transmitter and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was in here, but it's not gonna show up because this was back in June. I think what that was, we expended that later than that,
Okay.
didn't we? No, the communications, the 14,260.
Is
I
that
think
what- is that
that's,
it?
I think that's
Okay.
the KCCTV.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yes, I believe that is, yes, for this year.
You'll put a little KCT
Yep,
over there.
we can, yep.
Yeah, so we
It's
won't
hard
have
to
that
know because
expense.
there's no, it's not like my spreadsheet, and depending on what the budget note, if it didn't import.
What are the expenses side of that?
It's not a
See, that's
transfer.
just the in and out for the VNP building.
Yeah,
Yeah,
The 208 is more of an in and out and managing the
Okay.
20,
So
or the
you want it to come out of the
VNP
809
for the,
for the 5,000, 5,000 of the 15 of the museum.
yes, that should be coming out of this 809 for our city economic development, correct. And where is that best?
And do you want it to come out of the same place that the RCC Servants of Shelter?
yeah, something like
Yep.
that.
Yes, that's
Because-
most appropriate.
Yeah, because, and I'd like to hit them to at least, I don't know if, did we agree to give, I can't remember, to give out of the general fund money to the museum?
Yes.
Also?
Yes, there was 10,000 out of the general
10,000
budget,
for that.
5,000.
Then I'd like to give another 10,000 out of here too, for 20 for the year.
Okay, so you're looking to do, instead of the original 15 that you discussed, you want to do 20, so you want to do 10 and 10.
I do, yes. That's just me.
10 out of here, 10 out of the
Yeah.
jail.
So I think for one, they do go around, do marketing for the town. And we are kind of borrowing their land more than we thought, talking to Ted. So, you know, there's a good faith gesture maybe too,
All right,
but that's just me.
okay, I'll give you my vote.
Yeah, yeah, I'm okay with it.
All right.
So we don't know yet if Rainy River's gonna,
They are not
I
gonna
don't
be.
believe they
would-
are
They would
based
have,
on-
and he was even kind of, if I remember,
It's on the fence last year.
apprehensive last year about, they just kind of told him to ask anyhow.
that's gonna be zero then?
Pardon me?
The 30,
Yeah, we're the 30,
30,200?
yep,
Yeah,
yep, in the yellow.
because we gave services shelter.
Transfers permanent.
They haven't come yet either.
No, and I don't,
No, and
And
they
I don't-
came last
I don't-
year late in the game, and I looked up to see what that funding request actually said last year, and it was 10,000.
It
And
was
I believe
10,000.
that they classified it as, it,
Remember.
it didn't say one time, but it alluded to that.
yeah, it was a one-time, they asked as a one-time.
Yeah, there was something.
But a lot of people asked as a one-time, I realized too. But they did, it was supposed to be emergency to, they were hoping to get some grant funds, which is what we did tonight. You know, to the emergency shelter part of the grant
Yep.
is why they're looking for that documentation, because I think they're gonna look for some
Line
more.
for- Right. So that line item, then we'd just be budgeting the 10,000 for the museum, correct?
And then the other 10 out of the general.
Correct.
And then back to, I assume where we had previously done the chamber, the books, that'll be 0, I would assume.
Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know if my temperature will change.
Because they're gonna be coming to talk about icebox days and
Crazy.
crazy
It
days,
is.
which I can see possibly, because it is icebox days is a huge community event. Crazy days, I have a totally different feeling on.
Icebox days, I could somewhat get behind from a economic development perspective
Correct.
for promoting the area externally, because it is more of a festival,
And
but
and one thing
it's-
this city already does is provide $20,000 for
Yeah.
fireworks for icebox days.
in addition to all of the extensive amounts of labor that we
I don't know if
provide.
it's $20,000, it's not 20,000.
For both then, for 4th of July?
Yeah,
and-
that's everything. I think they only spend like about
it's
$2
like-
grand
Yeah,
Ah,
that's a
good,
couple
that's a
of-
nice round number.
on fireworks for the icebox event.
Yeah.
Correct.
But, because I still have, so, but we can worry about them next week, maybe we'll talk before that somewhat, but not together, of course, but, or no daisy chains. But, because whatever.
So we're gonna, this will look different than what we have.
It could look different. Right now, you've only got $26,000 in expenditures and you have 45 in revenue,
I like that.
right?
Keep a little bit in
I
there.
wish the servants people would come and ask for money to paint.
We did
the
pretty
building
good, though.
and Give it to them.
Oh, yeah, can we hire somebody to paint the building too?
Still got money.
Get it-
Well, I got a problem with
I'll take money out of my own pocket to have that
The what?
that
Yeah.
place
with how they
painted.
badmouth us with during.
Oh, I know.
Are you on that board?
I'm learning, what board's that?
Servants Shelter, you on that one?
I am not on that one, no. But we're kind of intertwined. But good guess, so that's kind of right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I am in Kutaska pretty close.
Okay, what else?
Will the Kutaska building purchase be out of the general, or do we need to, that's not something for this season?
Actually, the chief talked about having money in reserves that he was gonna be
Sweet.
using for vehicles that he doesn't, so he said he could use it out of that as well,
Okay.
Yeah.
so. And no, I don't think this would be the place to take that out of the
That would be a
to begin
stretch.
with, but, yeah, that would be stretching
I
the
was gonna say,
use.
I probably wouldn't, just from the perspective
Yeah, I
of
got it.
ownership,
I got it.
dealing with,
Yeah, no,
We'll get it.
so,
Yeah. Well,
yep. Yeah, we should have made that part of the motion, I missed that, apologize, so. Anything else on the budgets that you guys have questions on, or we need to discuss? Emma, do you have anything else?
I don't think so. EDA is usually pretty self-explanatory.
Then before we
Do
go,
they-
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't fully understand the 208, 809. Does this board also have to approve the 208 EDA, or is that separate? Does that fall under the city's
That falls
authority?
under the city, not
Okay,
under this
okay,
EDA.
Okay. Okay, then.
Yep.
I think then plugging these numbers in, and depending on what they want to do as far as the presentation we just heard from the Bolton and Mink people about the housing.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I would just need to know, like, do we have to have them approve a budget prior to the preliminary budget being approved by the city as a whole?
Say that again. Who approved what?
Does this board have to approve a final on the 809 before the end of September when the city approves the preliminary as a whole?
Yes, they
Yeah,
would if
I
this
would say that.
changes from what this is today.
Okay.
Yes. And it's all gonna depend on what the chamber comes asking.
Right, so we gotta squeeze it in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
probably have to, I mean, you can meet with the chamber as a committee of the whole, but it's something that's gonna probably,
That's
be budgeted out of here,
We'll have to have
so.
one more meeting before the final.
And we can,
Probably,
and
I
we
would-
can just do like today and throw it.
I was gonna say, we
Yeah.
just throw it on the day that we have the special meeting,
Yeah.
right before the special meeting
Right.
to approve the preliminary.
Then one thing, so what do we, before we, the presentation, where are we want to think on it a little bit, then come back and talk about it? The plan, I think it's something
We need to
we
do it.
should seriously
We need to do it. We need to
consider,
seriously look
because
at it. Yes.
we have that, like Paul said, we've done enough talking about, we need to do housing, do something about housing. Like I said, I think we're probably gonna be on our own.
Without the infrastructure, we're not gonna get any
Right.
housing.
And without that
So if
plan,
we've got
we're
some
not
money
gonna get
out
no
there and
grant.
Somebody that can write us grants for it, we need to get out there and do that right now, because otherwise, without that infrastructure, we will not have housing. If we get the infrastructure there, then we're gonna be interested in doing it.
Well, do we want to move that tonight then? Go ahead with the
I will.
59,000?
I'll make a motion to do it.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second?
I have a second, any more discussion?
And are you talking the
The whole.
agreement as a whole
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you can take parts.
to be budgeted from Fund 809?
Yep. I would say we might as well do it all if we're gonna have them do it. But,
And as
And I think,
it's,
I think it's just kind of at the tip of of an iceberg, of a smorgasbord of areas that different.
and we gotta
And
start,
then once we get that going and find out which area that most people want, we can start researching and try and find some more area for that type of housing, whether it's the pre-built or whether it's the
Yeah.
ones that are stick-built or whether it's
Yeah.
the small lots in town, you know,
Oh.
it just, we just need to get, we
yeah,
need to
I
get
will,
going.
all right, I'll take the motion. The motion then is for the total of 59,000-ish. Go with their plan to,
essentially that with, given that, then we would just basically be taking 40,000 out of reserves. We'd have 45,000 in roughly income.
Yep.
And then, you know, that's assuming obviously you're not pulling anything from the chamber at this point in time.
yeah. Okay, so I'll ask the question.
Aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. We'll start getting into the house business maybe.
And we'd be putting that under professional services?
Yes.
Sure, sounds good to me. All right, meeting adjourned. Better?
Oh, nice, nice.
Better?
I gotta go eat, I'm hungry.
I'll miss a lot of the Elks meeting, that's all right. Duty call.